You know you grew up in a black household in the 1970s if you remember plastic on the furniture, or if your grandmother kept her good dishes in a cabinet that nobody was ever allowed to touch. And there was always that one specific spoon that was only for cooking, and God help you if you used it for anything else. These weren't just random quirks. They were universal experiences that connected black children across cities, across income levels, and across the entire country. A black kid in Atlanta had the same childhood markers as a black kid in Chicago, or Detroit, or Los Angeles. That's because black households often operated on similar principles, valued similar things, and maintained similar traditions. You didn't need to explain these things to other black people who grew up in the 70s. They just knew. They remembered. They lived it, too. The plastic-covered furniture, the room nobody was allowed to enter, the switch from the tree outside, the look from your mama. That stopped you mid-sentence. The Sunday morning routine that was completely non-negotiable. The food rules that seemed excessive until you understood why they existed. The discipline that felt strict until you realized it was actually about protection. These signs weren't about income or geography, they were about culture. They were about how black families structured their homes and raised their children during a specific era when our people were building lives and creating stability, despite everything working against them. Today, we're going through 10 specific signs that prove you grew up in a black household during the 1970s. We'll look at why each one existed, what it taught black children, and why these experiences created such a strong, shared identity among us. Let's start with number 1. Plastic covers on all the good furniture. If you grew up in a black household in the 1970s, you remember that distinctive sound of plastic crinkling when you sat down. You remember the way your bare legs would stick to it in the summer, and the discomfort that constantly reminded you to be careful. Black families covered their living room furniture, the sofa, the good chairs, sometimes even the lampshades with heavy, clear plastic that protected the fabric underneath. Now, this wasn't about being poor or cheap. Black families did this because furniture was a major investment, one they often couldn't afford to replace. Protecting it meant that investment would last for decades. Our parents worked hard to buy that furniture. They saved for months or even years to furnish their homes respectably, and they were not about to let children or daily use destroy what they had sacrificed so much to obtain. The plastic also served another purpose. It kept the furniture looking brand new for company. For those moments when presentation mattered, it was about showing that black families could have respectable and well-maintained homes, even on modest incomes. Black children learned from this plastic that some things were too valuable to be used carelessly. We learned that preservation mattered, and that taking care of what you had was how you made limited resources last. That discomfort was the whole point. It reminded us to treat furniture with respect, to sit properly, and to be mindful of our surroundings. This practice taught us delayed gratification and respect for property, lessons that extended far beyond just the furniture, to how we learned to treat everything our families worked so hard to provide. Next up, sign number 2, the living room or front room that nobody used. Black families in the 1970s often had one room, usually the one with the plastic-covered furniture, that was completely off limits to children for everyday use. This room was for company, for important visitors, for special occasions, but definitely not for daily living. We would walk past this pristine room every single day and know we weren't allowed to enter, unless there were guests or it was a holiday. Black families maintained this space as a proof of respectability. It was evidence that despite working class incomes and facing discrimination, they could maintain a space that looked middle class and proper. For our parents, this room represented aspiration and dignity. It showed that black families valued having nice things, that they could maintain high standards, and that their homes deserved respect. This off-limits room taught us about different spaces for different purposes. It taught us about maintaining appearances that mattered in a world that judged black people so harshly. It taught us the difference between everyday life and special occasions. Households in the 70s used this strategy to preserve one space that always looked its best, that could be shown to anyone without embarrassment, a space that represented the family's best face to the world. Now for number 3, religious imagery prominently displayed on the walls. Walk into almost any black household during that era, and you'd see pictures of Jesus, often a black Jesus hanging in a prominent place. You'd also see a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. and sometimes John F. Kennedy, or even all three together. Black families displayed these images in living rooms, hallways, and dining rooms. They were visible reminders of the faith and values that guided the household. For our families, these weren't just decorations. They were powerful statements of belief and aspiration. The picture of Jesus represented the deep faith that sustained black families through struggle and discrimination. The picture of Dr. King represented hope for justice and progress, a source of pride in black achievement, and a commitment to the ongoing fight for equality. As children, we grew up seeing these faces every single day. We absorbed the values they represented and came to understand that our family stood for something more than just surviving. These images communicated our priorities. Faith mattered, justice mattered, and black excellence and sacrifice mattered. Our parents used these visual reminders to teach values without constant lecturing. They surrounded us with examples of dignity, strength, and moral courage that would shape how we saw ourselves and our responsibilities to our community. Do you remember that one wooden spoon in the kitchen that wasn't just for stirring? Let us talk about some things that were just part of life in black households back in the day. First up, the wooden spoon that lived on the stove. Every black kitchen in the 70s seemed to have one, always within arm's reach. Our mothers used them for everything: stirring pots of greens, checking the thickness of gravy, mixing up cake batter. But we kids knew that spoon had a secret life. It wasn't just a cooking tool. It was an instrument of discipline. When you saw your mom reach for that spoon, you knew you had officially crossed the line. Back then, many black parents believed in swift correction when we got out of line, and the wooden spoon was right there, convenient and effective. It wasn't seen as abuse. It was considered necessary discipline to teach us respect, obedience, and the fact that our actions had immediate consequences. That spoon was a cultural symbol. We knew which one was the spoon, and when our mom or grandma reached for it with that certain look, you either ran, apologized, or quickly fixed whatever you did wrong. It taught us to read the room, to understand boundaries, and to know that discipline was swift and certain. Next, let's talk about the good china. You know the set I am talking about, the beautiful dishes sitting in a glass cabinet that were almost never used. In the 70s, it was common for black families to have a set of fine dinnerware, saved for major holidays or very important guests. Our daily meals were on regular, often mismatched plates, but that good china stayed behind glass, untouched. This wasn't just about having nice things, it was about aspiration and respectability. Despite economic challenges, buying these special dishes was a statement. It said we appreciate quality. We can afford nice things, and our homes can rise to any elegant occasion. For our parents, owning good china symbolized a level of stability and refinement that society often said black families couldn't achieve. Even though they were rarely used, their presence mattered. They represented possibility, special moments worth celebrating, and standards worth keeping. As kids, we learned that some things were too precious for everyday use, that saving the best for special occasions made them even more meaningful. Then there were the containers that lived a double life. In black kitchens across America, you learned one rule very quickly: never trust the label. We reused absolutely everything. That old coffee can, it was probably holding bacon grease. That empty margarine tub, it was now full of leftovers. Those butter containers were the original Tupperware for us. We washed and reused glass jars for everything from rice and beans to homemade pickles. You always had to open the container to see what was really inside. This all came from a place of necessity and pure resourcefulness. Black families couldn't afford to waste anything, not even an empty container that could be given a new purpose. It was a lesson in seeing the potential in everything, reusing and repurposing before throwing things away, and making what you had stretch as far as possible. This taught us creativity and showed us that you do need expensive organizing systems when you can just use what you already have. Those mismatched containers represented a smart, practical approach to managing a household and building a little wealth by keeping costs down. Finally, let's talk about the Sunday routine. In black households in the 70s, Sunday was not a day for sleeping in. It was a day with a very specific, non-negotiable schedule. We woke up early, put on our Sunday best, those special outfits reserved only for church, and the entire family went to service together. There were no options. You couldn't skip church because you were tired or just didn't feel like it. The whole family went, sat together, and participated, and afterward, we all gathered for Sunday dinner, which was usually the biggest, most delicious meal of the week. This routine was so important. Church connected us to our faith and our community, providing spiritual grounding in social time with other families. Dressing up taught us about showing respect and presenting our best selves in important spaces. And Sunday dinner brought the family together around the table every single week, creating a powerful tradition of connection. The fact that it was non-negotiable taught us that Some commitments are absolute. It showed us that faith and family were priorities, and that showing up was a responsibility, not just a choice. These routines were the bedrock of our weeks and our childhoods. You know, looking back at black households in the 1970s, some disciplinary practices might seem really harsh to us today. One of the most talked about is the switch. Yeah, that switch. When black kids got into serious trouble, parents would often send them outside to find their own. They had to go pick a thin, flexible branch from a tree or a bush, and that was what would be used for the spanking. This wasn't just in one part of the country or in certain families. It was a common thing across the board. No matter where you lived or how much money your family had, the whole process was a form of discipline in itself. Being sent out to find your own switch gave you time. Time to walk, time to search, and time to think, really think, about what you did wrong. The dread would just build, and you had to make a choice. If you came back with a branch that was too flimsy or too small, you'd get sent right back out to find a better one. That just stretched out the whole nerve-wracking experience. It taught a powerful lesson. Your actions have consequences, and you can't run from them. Discipline was coming, and sometimes the waiting and thinking about it felt even worse than the actual punishment. For many black families, this wasn't about being cruel. It was a method of correction, sure, but also a deterrent. The belief was that this kind of physical discipline instilled a deep sense of respect and obedience. These were seen as crucial traits that would help black children navigate a world that wasn't always kind or forgiving. Parents felt they were preparing their kids for interactions with authority figures later in life, teachers, bosses, and especially the police, who wouldn't have the same patience or love that a parent does. From our modern viewpoint, we often condemn corporal punishment, and for good reason. But in the context of the 70s, for many black parents, this was a survival tool. It was about teaching their children that mistakes, especially in the outside world, could have incredibly severe consequences. Disobeying authority could be dangerous. So, learning to follow the rules and show respect wasn't just about being a good kid. It was seen as a fundamental skill for staying safe in a society that could be hostile. It was a tough lesson, born from a desire to protect. Now, let's talk about something a little less physical, but just as powerful: the look. Every black kid who grew up in the 70s knows exactly what I'm talking about. Black parents had this incredible ability to communicate an entire paragraph of warning and disapproval with just a single facial expression, no words needed. It was a look that could freeze you in your tracks. Right in the middle of whatever you were doing, you learned to spot it from a mile away and react instantly. Imagine being in church, maybe whispering or fidgeting, and you catch your mother's eye from across the pews. She gives you the look, and just like that, you're sitting up straight, silent as a mouse. Or maybe you were about to reach for something you knew you shouldn't, and you see your father's gaze lock onto you. You pull your hand back so fast, without him ever having to say a single word. This silent communication was a cornerstone of discipline in black households. Because it was so versatile, it worked anywhere, at any time. The beauty of the look was that parents could correct their children in public without causing a scene. No shouting, no big dramatic confrontation. Just a simple, silent glance that conveyed everything. I see you, you know better, and stop it right now. It was incredibly efficient. This taught black children to always be aware of their parents' presence and to check their own behavior before it got to the point of needing a verbal scolding or something more. You developed a kind of sixth sense for your parents' mood and expectations. It also sharpened your ability to read nonverbal cues in general, a skill that's valuable in every aspect of life. Black families relied on this unspoken language because it maintained authority quietly and effectively. It wasn't just about control. It was about teaching self-regulation and a constant state of awareness. It was a subtle, yet profound, tool for raising children to be mindful of their actions and their environment. If you grew up in a black household in the 70s, then you know about the unwritten laws of the kitchen. These weren't just suggestions. They were absolute rules, and every black child learned them early. Let us talk about the 10th sign, the strict food rules, and the absolute authority of the kitchen matriarch. First and foremost, adults always ate first. This was especially true when food was scarce or when company was over. Kids had to wait their turn, and you learned patience real quick. There was no such thing as just waltzing over to the refrigerator and grabbing whatever you wanted. You had to ask permission every single time. Opening that fridge without an adult's okay was a major offense. Then there were the designated foods. You know what I'm talking about. That special cake for the church bake sale, the good cuts of meat saved for Sunday dinner, or that one can of soda your dad was saving for himself. These items were off limits. You could look, but you better not touch. Your life depended on it. These weren't just groceries, they were part of a carefully managed system. And wasting food? Absolutely not. The rule was simple. You finish everything on your plate. Our parents worked hard to put food on the table for us to be wasteful. There are starving children somewhere wasn't just a saying, it was a reminder that we were fortunate to have what we had. This taught us to be grateful and to appreciate every single bite. The kitchen itself was sacred ground. It belonged to your mother or your grandmother, the woman who spent hours in there cooking for the family. Her authority in that space was unquestionable. You didn't dare enter her domain to play, and you certainly didn't question her cooking. Criticizing the food was unthinkable. Refusing to eat what was served, not an option. And asking for a special meal? You must be out of your mind. You ate what was cooked when it was served, and you said thank you. You were grateful because you understood, even as a child, that your parents were doing everything they could to keep the family fed and healthy. These kitchen rules weren't just about controlling what we ate. They were life lessons. They taught us respect for the hard work that goes into a meal. They taught us appreciation for having food when so many others, including many in our own communities, struggled with hunger. These rules also established a clear hierarchy within the home. We learned that resources were limited and had to be managed with care. The family's needs as a whole came before any one person's cravings. We learned that authority structures existed for a reason, even if we didn't fully grasp it at the time. These 10 signs we've been talking about, from the plastic on the furniture to these kitchen rules, weren't just random quirks of a few families. They were cultural markers, shared experiences that connected Black children who grew up in the 1970s. It didn't matter where you lived or how much money your family had. Rich Black families and poor ones both had plastic-covered couches. Families in big cities and small towns all had that one room you couldn't go in. Whether you were up north or down south, you knew what it meant when your mom told you to go get a switch. These common experiences created a powerful bond, a shared identity among Black people from that generation. You can meet a total stranger today, mention one of these things, and instantly find common ground, connecting over a shared childhood. Our homes operated on similar values and principles. These signs reveal what our families prioritized: discipline, respect, faith, presentation, and resourcefulness. They show how our parents were preparing us for a world that wouldn't always be kind. They were raising us with specific goals in mind to become respectful, resilient, and ready for any challenge that came our way. Looking back as adults, we see these things so differently, don't we? That uncomfortable plastic on the furniture, that was smart financial management. Our parents were protecting a major investment. That off-limits living room that seemed so excessive, that was about maintaining a sense of dignity and respectability. Having one pristine space in the house, that wooden spoon or switch that felt so harsh, it was teaching us to respect authority immediately. A crucial skill for navigating a world that demanded it from us, the strict Sunday routine. It wasn't about restriction, it was about anchoring our families in faith and tradition, giving us a community and a source of strength. And those strict food rules? They were teaching us respect and resource management, lessons that have served us our entire lives. Every rule that seemed arbitrary or overly strict as a child makes perfect sense now. As an adult, you understand what our parents were up against and what they were trying to build in us. These weren't just household rules, they were survival strategies. They were a way of preserving our culture and deliberately preparing Black children for the specific challenges we would face. Our parents in the 1970s knew they were raising children who had to be better behaved, more disciplined, more respectful, and more careful than other kids. The world wasn't going to give us the same second chances or the same grace. These 10 signs reveal a complete philosophy of raising Black children. It was an approach that prioritized long-term preparation over short-term comfort. It valued structure, respect, and faith. It was about maintaining our cultural identity while navigating the realities of America. If you experienced all 10 of these signs, you are without a doubt a product of a Black household in the 1970s.